story. What's yours?
Hello, friends, and welcome to episode 2 of Cool Story with David J. MacNeil. 2 years ago, my wife and I threw caution to the wind and decided to split our time between living summers on a boat on the Toronto harborfront and winters in a small town in Costa Rica. And boy, did we meet a lot of people in doing so. And so was born Cool Story, a perfect opportunity to have a brand new conversation every week with one of the many fascinating individuals I've met over our travels. This week, my guest will be Frank, a friend I met here in Playa del Coco who retired recently after a 31-year career as a California Corrections Officer. It was really interesting to hear what it takes to work in such a pressure cooker environment. So stick around for that. Also, be sure to stay tuned after my interview for the latest installment of what we like to call
Please don't try this at home.
This week's story is presented by my friend and former colleague from my YTV and CBC days, Paul Papadopoulos, so don't miss that. Also, I just wanted to thank you all for listening to episode 1, featuring my chat with my buddy, actor, and TV host, Joe Moticki. That was a lot of fun. Thanks also for liking my new Facebook page and following me on your favorite podcast platforms. Much appreciated. This process has been a lot of fun. Over the course of my career, I've had many opportunities to appear in productions in TV and film and do voice work. But I've always either played a character or read copy in ads. So this is the first time I've actually performed as myself. So that's interesting. I'm learning a lot, and I'm having a lot of fun too. Plus, I've always thought it was important to do something every once in a while that scares you a little. I'd say that this fits the bill. But enough about me. I hope you enjoy my chat with my friend Frank. Due to the sensitive nature of Frank's work as a California Corrections Officer, I felt it not necessary to share Frank's last name or specific information about the facility he spent the greatest part of his career at. Here's my conversation with Frank. Hey, Frank, how you doing?
Good. How are you doing, David?
I am doing great. I know you're back home in the U.S. right now, and you're weathering self-isolation right now.
That's correct. That's correct.
Yeah, you're hanging in there.
Yeah, everything's good.
Yeah.
Staying busy.
Nice. First of all, I wanted to congratulate you on your recent retirement. How long ago was it that you retired now?
I retired 2 years ago yesterday.
2 years ago yesterday.
Yeah,
And
April
that is
30th.
on April 30th. And that is after a 31-year career as a correctional peace officer.
Yes, that's correct.
What age was it that you first started working in that profession?
I started when I was 26 years old. I applied for corrections. Within 9 months, I was in the academy. I passed everything and all my tests that I needed to take. And being law enforcement, they kind of put you through a lot more screening. So it was well worth it. I got through the academy and started off at CCI Tehachapi, which was maximum security prison.
Okay. And how long did you work at that facility?
I worked about a year above Bakersfield, California, in Tehachapi. It's way up in the mountains. Approximately a year later, I transferred to another prison that was closer to my home, where I was from.
What was it that made you decide that this is a career that you wanted to embark on? Did you know somebody else, or had you been to a career fair or something, or what was it that tipped you off?
Yeah, I bumped into a guy that was working security for a hospital, and he told me that he was leaving that job for a real job, and he told me all about it, and I was kind of excited, and I applied, and I got right in also, probably a year or less after he did. And the reason I considered it was wonderful pay, excellent benefits. It just seemed like the people that got out of the academy and started working, everybody had new cars, they were buying houses. It was a real job, real money.
Yeah.
So the pay was good. And as I'm seeing now, the retirement is very good too.
Right. You were 26 years old, so you were still pretty young, but were you worried about your own security? Did you put a lot of thought into your safety and what that would be like working in a prison?
Yeah. When you're in the academy, they show you all the videos and all the movies and all the training. on how to stay safe.
Hmm.
So yeah, in that part of the training, I really listened up. So most of the time you're in pretty safe areas, but when you aren't in a safe area, then you need to make that phone call or get more staff or get some backup,
Right.
and you learn all that.
Yeah.
So for the most part, I felt pretty safe throughout my career. There's a few times when I didn't, and I got to go home every night. So
Right.
I'm thankful for that.
Yeah, and I'm sure too, when you've mentioned then there are incidents where your safety is compromised, you probably learn an awful lot from those moments.
Yeah, correct.
So you worked at that facility for 30 years of your career. That's a long time to work at one place.
It really is. Sometimes it felt like it was going fast, but once my kids all grew up and was in my 50s, I really had to understand that this line of work isn't for older folks.
Right.
So I retired at the right time for me. It
Hmm.
was a perfect time.
You mentioned to me that a lot of people who get into this profession go in and they are changed by the job in some way or in different ways, and then that was a realization that you had as well, that at some point there was sort of a click, and I think you mentioned that it was after talking to a mental health professional or somebody like that.
If you're not careful, you can get really stressed out in this line of work. So the best thing to do when those problems, when it's starting to affect you, is to call the 800 number they offer you to get help, free
Right.
counseling. Um, they even have help for people that maybe substance abuse or alcoholism
Sure, because
or
I'm guessing
mar-
that would be pretty prevalent in a work like that, where there's daily stress to the extent that there is working in a prison like that.
yeah, it's pretty much confidential, but
Hmm.
you hear about certain officers that are out. You kind of want to help them to get back in the game and not get terminated.
Right.
So yeah, there was plenty of tools to help you throughout the career if you chose to use it, and I recommended it to a lot of people that I worked with. If you need help, get it.
That's amazing. That's yeah. I mean, it's not surprising that that resource is there, but yeah, it's amazing that people actually reach out and use it, because I know it can be difficult to divulge your issues, especially a lot of guys. They don't really want to talk about some of that stuff and some of the stuff that's bothering them. They kind of keep it to themselves. Kind of an old school thing, right?
Yeah, that's true. In that line of work that I was doing, you don't want to show weakness. You want to be fair, but be strict, be tough. And if you're fair, then you're going to be respected by the inmates.
And what are the sort of the
Um,
most common incidents that would happen on your cell block? Is that what the term is, a cell block?
yeah, or a housing unit.
Okay.
Um, I would say the most times when you hear an alarm, it's depending on what institution, because some are more serious and some have more activity. Uh, but my line of work at that prison, most of the time it's just inmates fighting.
Yeah. Just fist fights, that sort of thing.
Yeah, and the worst kind of fight I would say would be a cell fight when you got
Hmm.
people slinging or stabbing in a cell because you got nowhere to go. That door is locked.
Right.
It's a cell is a death trap.
Yeah.
You can get whacked in a cell.
Yeah. And so what something
Mm.
like that goes down, are you in hockey, a fight will break out. There's not as much fighting in hockey as there used to be, but a fight will break out and the refs will sit and watch, and they wait until the players wear down. Is there a certain amount that happens before you go in? Or are you responsible to jump in there right from the get-go and make sure that you can shut things down?
Well, if it's not inside the cell and it's in the day room, yeah, you can approach them and give them orders to stop. You can use your pepper spray. You can use your baton if they don't stop. Uh, you don't want to use excessive force when you don't need it. You just want to use reasonable amount of force to gain compliance
Right.
by the inmate. But if it's a cell fight, They recommend you don't open the door until more staff are there or supervisors there, and you make a decision. They'll usually a supervisor will make a decision at that point whether the door it's time to open the door or it's just time to use pepper spray through the
Yeah.
door, through the food port.
Okay.
So yeah, if you play by the rules, you tend to stay out of trouble as far as those situations.
Right, because those rules also would make sure that protects you from a legal point of view as well, right?
Yes.
What makes a good correctional peace officer?
You got to be willing to learn,
Yeah.
and you don't want to go in as a know-it-all.
Hmm.
And be a good partner. You know, genuinely care about your partner's safety, and they'll hopefully do the same for you, because you really don't have much safety other than the other officers working around you.
Right.
So that's about it for that. I mean,
You had mentioned to me that part of the reason that you thought you had a very successful career was that you were a good communicator, and that went a long way.
yeah, you learn skills to communicate with prisoners and other staff. And you know, I always told the young guys that are new, just be a good citizen. You know,
Right.
treat the inmates right, treat your staff right, treat everybody right. And if you got to get tough, then they realize, hey, this guy will be reasonable up to a certain point, and then if you can't gain compliance with an inmate, then you take it to the next level.
At the end of the day, is your job something that you can shake off when you go home? I guess that's something that you have to learn, but how did you deal with that?
What I did was I'd get down to the gym and I'd go an hour and a half, and I would destroy my body to save my brain.
Right. And then that's part of the decompression, right? When you get home, but that's also, I'm guessing, for a lot of guards, being able to have having a large physique is part of being somebody who looks like you shouldn't mess with.
Yeah, not all the officers are big and strong, and you get a lot of different makes and models of people that work in the prison. But most of the correctional officers, I shouldn't say most, maybe there's a percentage of them that are in tip-top shape, pretty buffed. And what I learned about the prison is inmates will look at staff, and if you're skinny, they're going to call you, hey, you're skinny, you're, you're too thin to win. I mean, they would
Right.
always come at you. So but if you're kind of buffed, they respect you more.
And did you often get together after work with other employees, or is that something that was common?
um it, I want to say it wasn't common for me, because usually when you're off duty, you don't want to be with other officers talking about work.
Right.
You don't want. So if you had a couple buddies that you did something with, maybe you talked to them at the gym, or maybe you got invited to their daughter's wedding or something.
Right.
I'm going to say few and far in between. You don't expose yourself and your family to problems.
Right.
You want to, when you leave the prison, you want to be in a normal environment.
Yeah. Yeah.
Friends, family, church, whatever you're into, working out.
Right.
You,
All that stuff that
you
keeps you grounded.
keeps you grounded, keeps you healthy. Correct.
Right. I was looking on Wikipedia and I was checking out some of the different prisons around California. They often list a lot of high profile inmates. Did you have a fair number of high profile inmates at your facility?
Yeah, over the years, there was just so many, Lyle Menendez, Tex Watson,
Those
the
are some
Onion
big
Field.
names.
Yeah, and before that was the Onion Field killer, Gregory Powell, and I think he passed away. And I know Charlie Manson's passed away. In my brother's institution, he knew Charlie Manson.
Oh, really?
Um, yeah, and there's just all kinds of guys doing time for so many different things.
Yeah,
But it's just kind of fascinating to listen to some of their stories. Not
sure.
that you believe, not that you believe everything they're saying, but they got some pretty interesting stories.
Right. And I guess some of those guys, if they're in there for life, they've got nothing to lose. So they can brag and embellish and all that kind of stuff because they're not going to see the light of day anyways.
Yeah, that's correct.
You mentioned Tex Watson was one of the people that you had gotten to know. Can you be friends with an inmate?
You're not supposed to. You don't want to be over familiar
Yeah,
with a prisoner, but you can have a rapport,
right.
a normal rapport. Tex Watson worked for me. He swept and mopped the floors every day. And he discussed quite a bit about his case, about some of the murders, remorse that he had. He wasted his whole life when he got involved in all those murders with the Manson family.
And is there any kind of protocol as to how much you can discuss with prisoners?
You could go in an office and invite the inmate in. You sit down and close the door. You can have those kind of conversations.
Oh, really?
But you don't want to have conversations about doing anything illegal,
Sure.
because if you're going to get a job in law enforcement and do 31 years and you make it, you're pretty much by the book.
Yeah,
You don't see people going that that long in a career if they're going to get in trouble.
right.
I've seen a lot of people get fired over the years. So many people.
And going back to what you were saying about, like, for instance, we'll take Tex Watson. Having a rapport with a person like that, is that like any relationship? It takes quite a while before that person trusts you to divulge this stuff, or in this case, like a guy like Tex Watson, he's just happy to chat.
Yeah, you'll find a lot of prisoners are seeking normality, and the environment is not normal.
Yeah,
So they see myself. I'll just use myself. I come to work every day, and I'm showing normality. I'm showing a guy that's got a job.
yeah,
He gets here on time. I have life skills. I'm functioning.
right.
I'm preparing for a retirement. I've had a daughter get married. I'm doing all these things in my life and holding down this job. So inmates, they kind of gravitate toward somebody that they could use as a role model. Like,
Right.
wow, you did this and that, and you just you still show up to work. You've been here for years. Everybody knows you. You can have a good rapport with inmates. That's part of your job, is to get to know what's going on in your housing unit, get to know what's going on with your prisoners.
It sounds like
And
you're saying they get to live vicariously a bit through you, that they don't have that normalcy, and here's a little piece. It's something to cling to feel normal, to feel human, that they have this relationship with another person who's got their shit together, as they say.
yeah, that's true. They because there's a lot of nonsense in prison. Prisoners get tired of prisoners. They get tired of all that. But to sit there and have a conversation with an officer or a counselor or somebody else that's employees, uh, you can talk with the inmates. You just don't want to get off track and talk about something that can get you in trouble.
Right.
And that's the main thing, is just keeping it neutral.
Right. And what was your general take on Tex Watson?
Tex Watson was a young guy at that point when he came to California, to Hollywood,
Right.
and he got involved with Charlie Manson on the beach. And Manson was kind of a charismatic kind of guy, and
Yeah.
he started this little Manson family and decided to use these kids. I mean, they're like in their early 20s to do murders
Right.
for him.
Yeah. I
And
think his take was that he was going to use these kids to start a race war.
that's correct. And it just goes to show you how jaded their thinking was.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's correct. That's correct.
And from what I understand, I mean, I remember reading when I was much younger. I remember reading the book Helter Skelter, which was written by the prosecutor in the case, and it basically seems that Manson brainwashed the kids and had them hooked on a lot of dope that kept them from seeing things clearly, and then kind of pushed them into a situation to murder for him. But Tex Watson was the guy who pretty much did the deed, right? He was, and the rest were kind of along for the ride.
Yeah, I think they found him guilty on 7 murders, and
Right.
yeah, he was involved with a couple of the. There was two girls with him, Susan Adkins, and there was one other one. I'm not sure,
Hmm.
uh, but yeah, that was what they were supposed to do, was to go do the murders for Charlie.
And did you get a sense from him that he believed that if it wasn't for Charlie's manipulation and the drugs, that this was something that was not in his character? Or?
Yeah, he the stuff that he kind of shared with me was uh, remorse.
Hmm.
Um, Drugs played a big thing, big part of it.
Right.
Uh, yeah, I was told that he was on heavy drugs when this was all happening.
Right. Now, in general terms, dealing with inmates, is there a lot of remorse? Do you see remorse often in inmates, or they kind of just stick to the "I didn't do it" or that sort of thing? I know in the film Shawshank Redemption, it's just a film, but there's they often mention, well, everybody in here is innocent. Nobody will tell you they're guilty. I'm guessing that's more of a movie thing
uh,
than anything else.
um, a lot of guys won't. They're in denial.
Yeah.
See, the prison system's full of sociopaths. I read a book one time called "The Sociopath Next Door,"
Hmm.
and what this book talked about is in society, you can pick 100 people. 4 out of those 100 people in society are sociopaths.
Right.
So I don't really need to explain to you what a sociopath is,
Yeah.
but the prisons are full of them. A lot of times you're not going to. I find the remorseful inmates are the ones that have been in for a long time and they really wish they could get out. They
Right.
really wish they would have thought things through before they committed the crime. Yeah, part of the programs that they have for lifers, because some lifers do get out, they have to go to a series of classes
Hmm.
like victims awareness, AA, NA. There's just a whole lot of things they can do to prepare themselves for a parole hearing. I've seen some guys get out that did a lot of time. They got out.
Wow, that must be something else coming out on the other end of that, of after doing so much time and trying to reintegrate into society. How much work is actually done in prisons these days, would you say, to rehabilitate people in any kind of way? Is that
Oh,
a myth?
no, they're spending a lot of money. My department used to be called California Department of Corrections, CDC. Well, a number of years ago, they added a R at the end,
Hmm.
CDCR, and that means and rehabilitation. So they've pumped a lot of money into the system, increasing mental health
Hmm.
uh, professionals in the prison,
Yeah.
um, classes, vocational. They can work in prison industries and they
Yeah.
can manufacture things that the state sells. Some of the institutions make American flags, California state flags, screen printing. They make furniture. They make fighter gear for the California Department of Forestry
Okay.
for those officers that are working in that line of work.
Right.
Um, there's a lot of things that the prison PIA manufactures and then they sell. They can sell the product. I think it's up to 75 cents an hour.
Okay. So you get out with something in your pocket.
Yeah, a lot of those lifers saved a lot of money. They've got, I don't want to say hundreds of thousands of dollars, but I've talked to several guys that saved up to $30,000 just
Wow.
from working in PIA for years and years and years. You know.
Well, that's one way to get out in the street after too, and not at least have a bit of a buffer so you're not lured right away back to the criminal life. When you see inmates going through programs like that, do you see a change in their behavior or their outlook because maybe they've now got some hope or change in them?
Um, Not in all of them. If you're not working or going to school, then you're on C status, meaning you don't get extra time out of your cell. You have to lock up earlier in the evening. It's a different status. So most inmates will either work a job or go to school unless they are physically unable to do it.
Right.
So I would say yes. If a person's learning to weld, they're doing it to get a certificate with hopes to get out, get a job.
Would you pick this career for yourself again if you were 26 today?
Ah, well, what I do know about myself now is I had the right personality to work that job. I was a good communicator. I learned not to take things personal. It was an excellent career, but I dealt with some anxiety issues, which now that I've been retired 2 years, pretty much most of that's gone. That's a tough question. Would I do it all over again? I would say if I had other opportunities that were lucrative at the time, but I don't look back and shake my head like, oh man, I blew it. I'm
Yeah.
living the great life. I mean, I live in Costa Rica most of the time. My wife and I are happy and retired. It's been good.
You've had a game plan for a long time.
Yeah, I had a game plan, and when I first retired, there was a year in preparation, selling our house, selling Harleys, trucks, horse trailers. Um, I had a year, and then I realized I still need something else, so I started working for the Salvation Army as a volunteer.
Oh, nice.
Um, yeah, so I was kind of giving back a little bit,
Yeah.
and I did that temporarily until the day came when we packed our luggage and flew to Costa Rica.
Right. Why do you say you felt like you were giving back? Did you not feel like working as a correctional officer that in a big way you were giving back to society at the same time?
I probably was, but I get more job satisfaction talking to some of these guys that are in and out of the Salvation Army and the drug programs and the
Yeah.
work programs. Uh, I just like giving pep talks
Right.
because there's so much negativity. I gave a lot of pep talks in prison, but these guys that actually got out of prison, pep talk them. Tell them they got options and give them something positive. Talk to them. Not everybody wants to go back to prison, but not everybody has the skills or the life skills to stay out.
Sure. What's your take on seeing some of these things over the years on TV or films or whatever, and how they compare to reality of the job?
I purposely didn't watch any kind of law enforcement shows like Cops or any prison shows, but I remember watching with my wife Orange is the New Black. And I remember listening to what's going on in the background, what they're saying on the intercoms. And I have to give them credit. They nailed it. Other than the fact that it was an all women's prison and there was some Hollywood stuff going on.
Yeah.
But the day to day life in a prison facility, they nailed it. They must have had some really good people helping to write that.
Do you think society's attitudes are changing about locking people up forever? Are we becoming more empathetic to prisoners?
I think a lot of people are. Um, I think if you're a victim family, you wouldn't feel that way if you
Yeah.
lost somebody that was a horrible crime, and then you find out this person's up for parole, um, and some of them do get out. My hunch is that not everybody in prison was guilty. I mean, that's just my feeling after doing so much work in there. That there's some guys that you're like, oh my God, this guy, he's a good old boy. He's not hostile toward the officers. He's very helpful, and
Hmm.
they like talking to you because you're normal.
Hmm.
And for the most part, a lot of them are normal.
Yeah.
But I made a choice not to read the files because if I read the files, then I'm going to start hating inmates.
Oh,
So it's
really?
better for me. Yeah, because you don't want to read. I didn't want to be a counselor because go looking at what some of these counselors were dealing with. You got to read. You got to pick through their file, and some of them are heinous.
Sure.
And it's easier for me not to know and treat everybody the same way.
Sure. You wanted to judge people on their own merit or based on how they dealt with you.
Yeah, because they're already in prison.
Yeah.
So it's better not to have all the officers hating them, uh, which that happens too. I've seen that. So I think the culture's changed a little bit. I know they're letting it in California. They're letting out some lifers. I just became aware of that.
There's certainly a lot of people out there that have done some horrible things, but my take on it has just been that there's so much room for error these days. We're finding out that there's problems with all kinds of different evidence these days, and human, recollections from people about what happened on the day is often not very reliable, and there's just and politics and that sort of thing, that every once in a while you find out about somebody who's doing life that is exonerated. And that's been
Yeah.
my take. That's why I don't agree with the death penalty, just because it's just the margin of error is too huge.
Well, yeah, and here's the thing: if you committed a crime or you were arrested for a serious crime and you don't have money for a good attorney, the chances don't. The people that have a better chance are the ones that have family that are willing to drop 100 grand or 200 grand to fight for them, get a good attorney, because a public defender, a lot of times they're not that good. I don't know. I've seen some guys get out of prison through this thing called the Innocence Project.
Right.
They've
Well, my
got,
wife was just watching, there's a documentary series on the Innocence Project right now. It's pretty fascinating.
yeah, it is. And I know some guys that got out after years and years and years. I think the biggest thing they do when they first come to prison is a lot of these guys are doing a writ of habeas corpus. It's basically an appeal
Hmm.
that goes up in front of the judge, and most of these writs are denied.
Right.
But if you have a good attorney, a lot of it comes down to money, and it's sad, but I've seen it. And a lot of them come in there and they start fighting their case from behind the wall. You know,
Hmm.
getting a college degree, taking all the classes, taking victims awareness, taking the drugs and alcohol problem classes, you know, doing everything they can do to be found suitable for parole by the parole board.
Yeah. So when you meet new people today, do you assume right off the bat that people are going to be genuine, kind, or whatever? Are you more guarded than I would be when I meet people? Do you think?
No, I've pretty much let my guard down. Living in Costa Rica, most of the expats are nice people, just trying to live the same way I'm living. Decided to live in another country.
Yeah.
Um, no, I didn't want to be so jaded coming out of this career. I used the counseling a lot, the
Right.
free counseling
Yeah.
throughout the years, whether it was coping, anxiety, marital, whatever. You got
Hmm.
free counseling.
Yeah.
So that's what I told the young guys before I left. Don't throw away your marriage if you're the one. If you're stressed, get some help. If you're depressed, get some medication. Get what you need. It's all offered to you. And if you try to do it by yourself and you think you don't need help, then that's when the real problems happen. And then, they may not last in that career
Right.
if they choose not to get help.
Yeah. I notice it we're friends on social media, so I notice from time to time you'll post an article or a piece about unfortunate bit of news where somebody who worked in a facility, somebody you might have known or just a colleague of yours might have taken their life, or had issues with PTSD. Same kind of thing I hear oftentimes from soldiers.
Right. They've done research and they found that correctional officer working in the prison can have PTSD similar to a Vietnam veteran,
Hmm.
combat soldier.
Yeah.
I mean, you see stabbings, you see death, you see stiff bodies that have been rigor mortis sets in. You might come across a situation where I think the worst one I saw was a guy got his head stomped flat like a
Hmm.
pancake,
Yeah.
and it was nasty.
Yeah.
Uh, and what you do is you learn to make jokes about this stuff. It's like
Right.
ambulance drivers; they joke
Hmm.
about these things because it's so serious that if you don't joke about it, you might stress out,
Yeah.
or maybe you need to start drinking a little more or something. So,
Gallows humor.
yeah, you have to process it properly,
Hmm.
compartmentalize.
Sure. Yeah. Yeah, absolutely. I'm sure there's a lot of compartmentalizing that happens in a job like that. There is in any job. You're raising a family at home. You've got a wife, and you've got to make sure that you can take good care of those people. You can't take your troubles home with you. You got to compartmentalize. You got to learn how to do that.
Yeah, exactly.
It sounds like your employer had a lot of opportunities for you to get past that if you're willing to take that.
Yeah, there's a new rash of suicides now in the Department of Corrections in California, where more than ever, these officers are killing themselves, and it's very sad.
Hmm.
There's plenty of help that they can get, but correctional officers, they don't ask for help. The stuff I've read is if they decide to kill themselves, they just do it, and it's really really horrible uh, just to lose people that you knew.
Hmm.
I mean, I've been gone 2 years, but when I left, there was plenty of officers that have a lot of years ahead of them, and some of them were my friends. And when you find out that they had a little marital problem, or there's a separation going on, and then there's two households they have to pay for, and then
Hmm.
they're trying to get retired, but they might have to work a lot of overtime. And a good friend of mine dropped dead of a heart attack. It was really sad.
I'm sorry to
He
hear that.
was, yeah, he was so close. So if you're not dying of things like that, and then there's suicide, and then there's the people that can cope and get help and move on.
Hmm.
You know, we all go through our problems, but find a way to move on. Uh, there's all kinds of help. The department is just handing out these phone numbers. Call
Yeah.
these 800 numbers and get in and get help.
Yeah, that's good to hear. Because, like I was saying, one of the reasons I wanted to chat with you about this was to get some of the misconceptions out of the way and to talk about the individuals who work in prisons, because we often see them framed in a way for television and film that makes it very interesting for stories, but it doesn't seem. If it was like that to work in a prison, the way you see it in movies and stuff like that, you figure a lot of people probably wouldn't.
When I started in 1986, man, inmates were always hurting each other, killing each other. And the prisons are still violent, and there's still murders, and there's still rapes, and there's still drug smuggling, and it's always going to, for the most part, or it's always going to have those kind of things going on. But nowadays, inmates have options,
Hmm.
more options. The state's spending a lot of money on trying to rehabilitate. They've even got programs where they can take care of dogs. They have like animal therapy
I've
folks
seen
that
those
are in
before.
there.
Yeah, I've seen pieces on that where they bring in animals and they're helping oftentimes, as you put it, sociopaths figure out how to empathize with other creatures, starting with animals, right?
Yeah, it gives them another way of thinking. It gives them an opportunity to do something else besides sharpening up a knife, hiding it somewhere, burying it in the dirt, and then stabbing somebody. Or, you know, uh, some of the prison mentality is really pathetic.
Hmm.
I mean, we've got some real uneducated thinking going on in there. Um, a lot of them didn't go to school, or they dropped out. And they went into crime and drugs, and they didn't hit any stop signs. They just blew through all of them.
Right. And then they end up in prison, and then oftentimes that's the learning institution for bettering how to do it next time, right? Or it can be crime college in some ways.
Yeah, that's what this one guy that was an inmate that worked around me. He was a Hell's Angel. He said, "Man, if I would have had more life skills just on how to deal with things, uh, he said his life skills were go stab somebody,
Hmm.
go kill somebody, go rape somebody, and it was all behind drugs and things." And I thought, what a real sad lifestyle. And it started in this person. It started being abused at home as a child, coming home and the door's locked. They're not allowing him to come in and live.
Right.
So he ended up living out of a trunk in a junkyard in the San Francisco area. And his role models were bad guys.
Yeah.
And
That's all you know.
that's all he knows.
Well, so now you're retired. You've been retired for 2 years now. You're going to be spending a bunch of your time here in Costa Rica. What are you looking forward to? Retirement and lifestyle, and what's that carrot look like for you today?
The beauty of it is it's all wide open. I can choose to, like you saw me in Costa Rica, then I disappeared for a while. I was in Mexico.
Yeah.
Uh, Looking at Mexico, is this where we want to live? And after 2 weeks over in Mexico, we made a decision to come back to Costa Rica. And then most recently, we came back to California to take care of personal things like income tax returns. And this pandemic came out of nowhere, and we're not allowed back yet
Yeah.
because we're tourists. We're not
Hmm.
residents.
Yeah.
So
Plus, there's just no flights.
there's
There's
no
that part of
flights.
there's that part of the equation too.
The government doesn't want to see me right now over
Yeah. Well,
there.
your time will come. So you're looking forward to getting back here with your wife and resuming your leisure lifestyle here in Costa Rica soon.
Oh yeah, we just love uh, going to the gym in the morning, and then come home, eat lunch, or go to a restaurant in town and have some ceviche or uh, something fresh from the ocean. And then we'll go on our bicycles a block down the road and we'll go snorkeling for a few hours and just laying there on the beach and meeting new people walking by from all kinds of different places in the world. It's kind of a fascinating lifestyle.
It is. It is. And that's what I've been telling people. That was the genesis of this whole podcast. I was talking to a buddy of mine about all the different people because my wife and I, you know our story a bit, we sold our place in Toronto so that we could use those assets to shake it up. So we got we decided to live on our boat at a marina in Toronto on the harbor front there. There's a whole different subset of different personalities that choose to live in a marina. So that was fascinating. Then we get a place down here in Costa Rica, and it's the same kind of deal. You're meeting people from all kinds of walks of life, and you're meeting people who are not like you at all. So, you spent a career of working with a certain type of, I guess, personalities, right? Who can work in a penal facility, and then you come here and it's like, wow, now I have friends here who I said I got a friend here that I've met, close friend now. He's a farmer. I told him I've never met a farmer. Bizarre,
Yeah.
just because I've lived in a big city my whole life. So I had a lot of questions about what it's like to be a farmer, and that's the thing that I've really enjoyed about living in a place like El Coco is that, man, all the different people you meet, it's fascinating, and they all have great stories, right?
They all have a good story once you're sitting at the bar.
Yeah, that's
Have a
it.
drink and talk about where they came from and where you're from, and is this your first time here?
Yeah.
A lot of people were blown away when I told them, no, we came here 4 times before we decided to move here.
Yeah. And then there's all kinds of people that show up for a vacation and 2 weeks later, you
They're
get
gone.
I've had a lot of experiences with people who come down to visit, and a couple months later, they shoot me a note and say, we're coming down to look for a place.
Yeah. Costa Rica's it's a good choice in places to go. It's very safe.
We can wrap up on the career side. You told me that when you retired on the last day, that it was very emotional, and I was very surprised when you told me why it was an emotional day. Do you recall this?
Yeah, I was working a half day on the day I retired, and some of the inmates that I've known for years and years, some lifers, approached me, um, and they wanted to shake hands, and it was mutual.
Mm-hmm.
And these inmates cried.
Yeah.
They cried at the loss of, I don't want to toot my own horn, but a good correctional officer.
Mm-hmm.
And they said that they're never going to find somebody that would talk to them or, pep talk.
Yeah.
It was flattering. And
Yeah.
then I shook hands and I walked out for the last time. And I haven't been back. And there's really no reason for me to ever go back in.
Mm-hmm. Well, that's quite something to make an impact like that on people's lives.
Yeah, I wish the best for all the staff and for the inmates that can get help or actually get out and be productive. I wish them all well too. I didn't go in that line of work to beat up prisoners and drag my knuckles around and hate on people,
Mm-hmm.
because that's really not what prison's about.
Well, and you're just doing more harm to yourself as well, really, if you live that way.
Yeah.
If I were ever have the misfortune to land up in a situation where I'm incarcerated, I'd certainly want to be in a position where somebody like you was looking out for me.
Yeah, I put out a lot of fires in there, but it's my pleasure to do this podcast with you.
I really appreciate it, Frank.
Thank you so much.
All right. Cheers, man. Hope you enjoyed my conversation with Frank. It was interesting. After our talk, Frank mentioned to me that based on the amount of time he had spent doing shift work inside a prison, that he himself had lived a total of 18 years of his life behind bars. Coming up next, this is my good friend Paul Papadopoulos and his submission for a little something we call...
Please don't try this at home.
I'm Paul Papadopoulos, and this is my story. Cuba, November 2008. My wife Lisa and I were enjoying a week away with our 6-month-old son Nico. We met this really fun English couple, Baz and Jackie from Manchester. Tons of jokes and laughter. One afternoon, we joined them for some beer and appetizers by the beach. I'd been in the pool with Nico. He was wearing those, little swimmer's diapers. I had Nico in one arm while I ate fried chicken bites with mayo-based sauce. So, white sauce. At one point, my arm got tired. I switched arms and started eating with the other hand. I noticed a big dollop of sauce on my knuckles. I mean, huge. As I was listening intently to the story Baz was telling, I inadvertently sucked the chunks of sauce off my knuckles. As I swallowed, I realized that the sauce on my knuckles was greenish brown, not white, with chunks of peas and potatoes in it. I looked straight ahead in a daze and said, I just ate my son. I just ate my son's. Well, Lisa, Baz, and Jackie lost it when they realized what had just happened. It had squeezed out the legs of the little swimmer's diapers all over my arm and hand, and I ate it. They were screaming with laughter. Me? I was in shock. I kept repeating, I just ate my son's over and over. While I went to the bathroom to clean both of us up, Lisa, Baz, and Jackie roared with laughter. Every scat joke imaginable. When I came out, they tried to keep a straight face. No luck. So I will forever be able to say to Nico, hey man, I've had enough of you. I'm Paul Papadopoulos, and that's my story.
Thank you, Paul. Thanks again also to Mr. Jerry Stamp, who wrote and performed the Cool Story theme song and all other jingles and stings that appear on the show. Do yourselves a favor and look for Jerry's music wherever you stream. And finally, thank you for listening.
Everybody's had some adventures. Everybody's had a few close calls. Everybody's got a story. What's yours?